Hello, my name is Lauren Howard. I'm a business management major at the University of Alabama A&M, and I've did my presentation on prostitution. And is prostitution a sign of society's moral decay? While prostitution claims as the world's oldest profession, it has widely been discredited and could easily assume a replacement title as the occupation has withstood the most controversy in the longest period of time. A prostitute is a person who engages in sexual activity for payment. In this presentation, I will discuss the moral grounds of prostitution, the criminalization, and the components that make this line of work so taboo. The origins of prostitution. Prostitution is known to date back as early as 224,000 BCE. It's known records that prostitution is listed as the Sumerian record as a form of occupation, and it has been discovered that it was known as temple service work and seemed to be an acceptable and legitimate profession. Only in 1075 BCE, when women began to experience regulations such as being legally required to wear veils in public unless they were sex workers who were legally required to not. Prostitution received its first prohibition status in the late 500s from the Visigoth king of Spain for being incongruent with Catholic values. Any girls or women found guilty of prostitution were flogged extensively and exiled, which was almost equivalent to a death sentence. There are many reasons for prostitution and why women engage in prostitution to sex work. Some are proven to be by force, coercion, or fraud. Some women have been faced with extreme adversaries and find it is the only way to financially support themselves, their families, or their children. Some women have engaged in sex work as a gateway to a drug addiction and find it is the only way to support their drug habits. And many women have been abused as children, either physically, sexually, or both, and find themselves in a common web of trauma. Some disadvantages of prostitution are sexual violence and physical assault are the most norm for women that are in legal prostitution. Studies have shown that 60% of women in legal prostitution were physically assaulted, and 70% were threatened with physical assault, and 40% have been coerced into being legal prostitutes. PTSD is also a main effect for prostitution, including high risk of STDs. Some advantages of prostitution. There are many advantages of sex work and the push to make it legal, but at what cost? Many believe the legalization of prostitution can protect women from abuse and violence, and it can also reduce or lessen the spread of sexually transmitted diseases. When it comes to morality, I find for it to be a very touchy subject. On one hand, I believe that a person should have complete control over what they want and do not want to do with their body. And everybody has a right to choose. So if a person wants to engage in sex work, I don't think that we or anybody else can shame them or make them feel bad about doing something that they want to do with their body. And I also want to believe that the legalization of prostitution would minimize the violence that is associated with the line of work. But I feel like that's simply not true. The world will always be filled with greedy and entitled individuals who feel as though they have control over other individuals. And abuse is a long-going stigma that has been going on in the world for so long. And little to nothing has really been done to change that. I think safe sex work should be allowed to anyone who would like to engage in the activity, and it should not be forced upon women who have already endured many types of trauma and other advantages in their lives. I think it should be illegal for women who are being abused by spouses or people who have coerced them into being sex workers. I also think that the legalization of prostitution so that the government could tax the sex worker prices and start making revenue is also immoral. Our government has a great way of policing women's bodies and making them do things that they might not find themselves okay with doing. But when it comes to being there for women, when women are in domestic abuse or find themselves pregnant or can't take care of children that they've had and need government assistance or anything like that, the government may not always be there. But when it's time to make you have a child or endure some things, they're quick to make that your responsibility. So, in one hand, I do feel like prostitution should be legalized, but in the other, I feel that morally it can't be legalized because there'll always be somebody who won't necessarily profit in a good way off of it. Someone will always be victimized. Someone will always be abused. Someone will always be kidnapped or sex trafficked against their own will to do things that they don't want to do. And if that's the case, I don't think this line of work should be legalized. Thank you.